Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the TotalScreen.com. Hello, my name is Tyson.
And I'm Will.
And today we are going to be talking about What If, Episode 1, The Suicide Squad, and some other stuff coming up and news stories that are too numerous to list off right now. Let's kick things off with On the Horizon. On the Horizon is the segment where we talk about stuff that's going to be coming up in the next week that you might want to be on the lookout for. And so I have quite a few things on our list this time, but we're not going to talk about them too terribly much. It's kind of more to illustrate the point that stuff's starting to come back. There's a lot of stuff that's been off TV for 2 years that now we're coming back. So starting up, Brooklyn Nine-Nine returns for its final season on Thursday, August 12th. I remember when the whole George Floyd thing happened last year, there were people from the cast of Brooklyn Nine-Nine talking about how they weren't sure how they were going to try to make a comedy show about police officers again after that event.
Right.
So that tells you not only that that's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, it might just be that they waited this long so that they didn't have to handle it. It also serves the point of illustrating just how long that this is when that first happened, they were talking about that and they were supposed to be in the planning stages for a season, and it's just been more than a year since then. So yeah, it's that's coming back now. This is we had a bunch of stuff that was kind of missing last year because of the pandemic, but then this year it was when we got really hit hard with pandemic schedule delays and stuff, because it was this stuff that was supposed to be filming around the time the pandemic started that was being delayed so much. But besides Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Titans is returning. That's been, I think, a couple of years. I think the last season of Titans was season 2, and that was when it was still DC Universe. So that was before the launch of HBO Max.
Yeah, it was, when they had the DC Universe streaming service, which I thought was kind of silly to have that. But
it makes sense only if you're a comics reader, because they also had the comics.
Yeah, they have the
collection.
DC Unlimited with that. That was a good perk, actually.
Yeah, that was the only way that it really made sense. If you're all in on DC, then that service made sense. But for any wider audience, it really just did not make sense. That tells you kind of how long it's been. Titans probably should have come out last year, the next season, but everything got delayed. Everything got held back because of the Rona. So both Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Titans are returning tomorrow, August 12th. Tomorrow from the time we're recording this. By the time this podcast is out and any of you are listening to this, it should already be out, those two shows. Also, I think I forgot to say, but Brooklyn Nine-Nine, this is its final season as well.
Yes, yes, it is.
Also coming up on Friday, Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.01 Thrice Upon a Time. Are you a big fan of the Evangelion anime series?
No, I never watched it.
I was never huge into it either, but I know it's a big thing for a lot of people. That's coming Friday, August 13th to Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Also on that day, Free Guy comes out to movie theater. So that's the Ryan Reynolds movie where he's basically an NPC in a GTA style game who becomes self-aware. So that movie was supposed to come out last year, I believe.
Yeah,
got delayed like everything else. And, but now it's coming out this Friday, in movie theaters. I don't think there's any, same time streaming deal. It's technically, it's technically owned by Disney now, but it's not on Disney Plus.
It was produced under Fox. It went into production before the Disney buyout. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things that Disney inherited when they bought Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's skews a little bit older than most of the stuff they put on Disney Plus, so they're not putting it on Disney Plus as like a premiere access like they did with, Black Widow and they did with Jungle Cruise that came out recently or anything like that. Like
there's
not
no
doing
premiere
that.
access for this.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any tie-in with Hulu or any option to like buy it or do like a $20 rental or like there's nothing that.
I think premiere access is dead. They haven't said Shang-Chi comes out in September. They haven't said anything about premiere access for that movie.
I think they might end up announcing it just because of the Delta variant and how much it's starting to lock everything back down.
Yeah, it's locking everything back down.
Yeah.
We could get into this more when we get to Suicide Squad, but if you saw Suicide Squad's box office was not good.
It wasn't horrible.
It did not meet expectations.
Yeah.
It was 26 million and the studio expected 30 million.
My only point is that people are making it out like it's a colossal bomb. Like it just completely destroyed and, Warner Bros. Is like hurting for money now and all, it's like, that's not the case.
That's not the case. No, that's not the case.
It'll make its money back once you factor in foreign and, the streaming.
It's the question of, how much did streaming affect that box office?
Oh, I think by a pretty big amount.
Yeah.
I think some movies.
And like I said, we could get into this more when we actually get to Suicide Squad.
But anyways, that's Free Guy. That's Friday, August 13th in movie theaters. And then lastly, on Sunday, August 15th, Heels comes out on Starz. This is the wrestling drama series starring Stephen Amell from Arrow. If you're into wrestling, this is going to be like...
If you're into wrestling and if you're into Stephen Amell, you will love this.
Yeah, it's about like a small league. It's not like WWE or something. It's a small league and they're doing wrestling promotions and there's a lot of like wrestler cameos in it. I know like Mick Foley has a cameo in it. And so there's a lot of that if you're really into, big old time wrestlers and famous people that are involved in wrestling. And there's probably going to be more as the series goes on if it continues on past its first season. But this is kind of like a big project for Stephen Amell because he's such a huge wrestling fan. So you remember when he was doing all that like wrestling cross promotion stuff with like Arrow?
Yeah.
Where he got into like a feud with like a wrestler or something and actually like wrestled at like some wrestling events. Like if you're into that stuff, Heels on Sunday, August 15th. And that's it for On the Horizon. Our next segment is On Beat. On Beat is where we talk about news stories. So first up, Tom Hardy was interviewed on some red carpet or at some event or something or other. And he basically got to talking about Taboo season 2. So here's the thing. If you haven't seen Taboo, it's an excellent series. Will and I covered it back on when we used to do the Weekly Set podcast, like a long time ago, to let you understand really how long ago that was.
Wild.
4 years ago.
I completely forgot the show existed.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was coming back, to be honest. So.
Oh yeah, I'd completely given up on it.
Yeah.
It's from the same showrunner as Peaky Blinders. It was just a really good show about this guy who had this intimidating aura. It was like not Victorian England, but like...
It was 1700s. It was colonial times.
Colonial England, yeah.
Yeah, colonial England, yeah.
It looked really interesting. It ended with them all kind of like the main character and his crew kind of like setting sail, and then that was it. It was like, oh, what are their adventures going to be now? Are they going to be like pirates? Like, what's going to happen?
Their adventures going to take them nowhere because we're not making any more of this. It's like, hey, yeah.
Tom Hardy was saying in the interview that he is actually like that Taboo is very important to him. So it's something that he is definitely pursuing to continue on to make another season.
Peaky Blinders is done now, right?
I think so.
I think it had its final season. I think I heard somewhere it had a final season, but I don't know. So like, it's not like, the creator can't focus attention on making it more taboo, right?
What's interesting here, though, is that when he talked about the possibilities of what they could do for a second season, it's kind of like all over the place. And like it's not, there's no like set direction. So everything he's talking about isn't like they're currently in pre-production and this is the direction they're going in. It's kind of like they're just shopping around ideas and they're not even in a pre-production phase yet. So even if this gets a second season, it's probably not going to be for several more years. But one of the things he said is that it it could take place in the 1960s in the Vietnam War with descendants of the Delaney family. It's the main character and his sister and their family line basically fighting in the Vietnam War, which would just be kind of crazy. Like it would be tonally similar to what Taboo was, like to what the first season was, but not at all related storyline wise, except that it's the same family.
Right.
And then he said it could also be like a Revolutionary War, like period drama. Like it could take place in America during the Revolutionary War, which is around the same time frame, but it would be moving locations. And then he said it could just be a direct continuation of like where they left off, like with the same characters. So it's kind of, just sounds like they're shopping around just all sorts of crazy ideas, and they're more interested in kind of like the family line with like Tom Hardy playing like, I guess through various seasons, different people in that family line rather than the same character. And then always kind of, just a similar tone, but not anything else. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting way to talk about it, that like Taboo season 2 could be in like the Vietnam War. That would be kind of weird,
Right.
I mean, it kind of fits. You could totally fit that kind of like Heart of Darkness style that like Taboo had into the Vietnam War. Like you could definitely match those, But yeah, it's just very strange.
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah.
You brought up another piece of news related to Tom Hardy.
Yeah, Tom Hardy says he really wants to get Venom and Spider-Man together in a showdown.
Sounds like he just wants to fight Tom Holland.
Yeah, he wants to fight Tom Holland. He was actually talking about a wrestling match in real life. He was actually talking about Venom 3, but that's just what they reported it as. And Tom Hardy was just like, no, I just really want to punch the shit out of Tom Holland.
They're going to show up on season 2 of Heels.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about.
That's what he's talking about. Tom Hardy doing the promotion circuit for the new Venom movie, Let There Be Carnage, told Esquire magazine Hardy confirmed that he's already playing a third Venom movie. Anyway, Tom Hardy said with regards to getting Spider-Man and Venom together, I would be remiss if I wasn't trying to steer any kind of connectivity. Hardy said, I wouldn't be doing the job if I wasn't awake and open to any opportunity or eventuality or be excited by that. Obviously, that's a large canyon to leap, to be bridged by one person alone, and it would take a much higher level of diplomacy and intelligence sitting down and talking to take on an arena such as that. Hardy continued, should both sides be willing and it be beneficial to both sides, I don't see why it couldn't be. I hope and strongly with both hands push eagerly towards that potential and would do anything to make that happen within what's right in the business. But
sounds like, he was like thinking to himself, like, am I going to have to kill some people to make this happen? And then corrected himself real quick and said, oh, within what's appropriate.
Within what's appropriate, yeah. Really.
So that's Tom Hardy news. The last 2 stories. Our next piece of news is AT&T has just sold Crunchyroll to Sony's Funimation. So instead of just saying to Sony, like Sony has like independently kind of run subsidiaries. And one of them is their Funimation group, which is kind of jointly controlled by, I think it's like Sony Arts and Entertainment and Sony Music, or I don't know if it's all of Sony's divisions, but basically the one that controls Funimation bought Crunchyroll. And so now the 2 biggest anime streamers are one. It was a $1.175 billion in cash deal. And this is going to make Sony basically a monopoly in anime distribution outside of Japan. There are a few other players that kind of still have the rights to a few things here and there. Netflix licenses like maybe 4 anime a year. Not that much, right. But every so often they'll license an anime series or something and get the exclusive rights to that, in other territories outside of Japan. But most, like the vast majority, fall between Crunchyroll and Funimation. And now they're both owned by Sony under a single brand, apparently.
It sucks. Monopolies suck.
It sucks in one sense, but maybe not in another. The good side is for anime fans, you can kind of just get the one service and not really have to worry about where stuff is from other things. And that's like a small positive. The other thing that makes it not so much of an overwhelming negative being a monopoly is that this is outside of Japanese rights.
That's true.
This isn't like, it shouldn't have too much of an effect on production.
Right. It shouldn't affect production too much.
Yeah.
Right. Which would be the real negative, if everything was a monopoly.
Though Sony does own several like anime production companies in Japan as well.
Not surprising.
This could be a leverage position for them as well.
I heard a Eurogamer put out a rumor. I don't know if they were speculating, said Sony Sony's considering a new tier for PlayStation Plus with Crunchyroll included. It would cost more than the current tier of PlayStation Plus. I don't know.
I mean, Crunchyroll by itself is something like, I think like $7 a month.
Right.
So PlayStation Plus is what, $60 a year?
Yes.
So yeah, obviously it would have to be more than that, you know?
Right.
If they're going to add in Crunchyroll too. And if they're doing that, I imagine they would add in Funimation as well. They'd add it all in together as a single service.
I would hope they would, you know, if they have
so that should make it even more. I'm interested in what they're going to do, if they're going to change, if I'm going to have to get a different app, if it's going to have different branding. You know, I'm a Crunchyroll subscriber. I don't subscribe to Funimation. Most of the stuff that I like on Funimation comes to Hulu like a week later.
That's true.
A week behind on that.
A lot of it is on Hulu.
So I just do that for the Funimation stuff I watch, which, you know, isn't ideal, but it's better than paying for a second service since I already have Hulu. Yeah, there's a lot that's yet to be seen about how this is going to play out for the consumer. Hopefully not too much is going to change. I'm hoping they don't raise the rates on me, but I'm guessing they probably will. I'm guessing they're going to end up going to something like a $9.99 a month rate and probably no annual subscriptions, which also helps to save some money through like on Crunchyroll, because you can do one of those things where you pay like $70 a year, you know. Doubt we're going to get that anymore. We'll have to see. Hopefully it's not locked behind like PlayStation Now so that the only way you can get Crunchyroll is through a PlayStation Now subscription. That would kind of suck for me since I don't have a PlayStation.
Right.
Our next piece of news. This happened almost immediately after we recorded our last week's podcast.
Stuff, right?
Yeah. So Matt Stone and Trey Parker of South
Paramount put in a huge bet on South Park going into the future. Pretty crazy deal that they managed to sign with Paramount for Paramount
$935 million.
Yeah, this is big.
6-year deal.
14 movies that they're producing. That's crazy.
So this is going to be, and the series. So the series is continuing on.
Yeah, the series is continuing on and they're doing movies. Like, it's not just like one movie. They're not like, oh yeah, we're going to do more seasons of South Park and a new movie. Hooray.
When I first started seeing
14 movies.
When I first started seeing tidbits of this deal, I thought like, oh, I saw the 14 movies thing first, and I'm like, oh, so they're just going to do movies like instead of the series. Like they'll put out like 3 movies a year or something and then not do the series anymore. In the same way that the last 2 South Park things we got were the pandemic specials, you know? So I thought like, oh, they're just going to do something like that, like a slightly longer form release to Paramount Plus, you know, movie thing like a couple times a year or something.
South Park it's like The Simpsons or Family Guy, where it seems like they're only going to stop doing it when they want to stop doing it. Because like it's one of those things that, yeah, it's never getting canceled. So, you know, it's only going to stop when the people in charge want it to stop.
I mean, at least it's still funny.
Yeah.
Its best years are behind it. I mean, seemingly. I mean, South Park's reinvented itself a few times, so its best years might still be ahead of it. It could kind of like, you know, do a refresh that makes it more interesting and they end up getting their best stuff further ahead. But that doesn't seem to be the case. The best years seem to be behind them already, but it's still funny. Whereas like Simpsons is like hard to watch now.
It really is. Well, I don't know, because I haven't actually watched Simpsons in like over a decade.
I've tried a few times off and on.
Maybe like 2 decades at this point.
Yeah.
Like,
I stopped actively watching The Simpsons, I think, in the late 90s.
Yeah, same.
And after that, so like I've kind of watched it off and on.
So like all the Simpsons references I quote constantly, like everywhere, only go up to like episodes in the mid 90s. Yeah. It's just like those are all my references.
Well, pretty much all of everybody's references. Nobody is like quoting stuff from current Simpsons, you know?
Right.
It's pretty much dead. So it's like, that's the difference. Like South Park is still doing things that are kind of like new and interesting. PC Principle is a fairly new thing on South Park, you know? And that's like become a huge meme, you know? Right. So it's like stuff like that. They're still doing things like that. They're still doing interesting things. Simpsons and Family Guy haven't done anything remotely like that in decades, you know?
No. Well, Family Guy is always just random pop culture, like, joke.
Yeah.
That you're only going to get if you're tuned into popular culture. You, like, have an idea of what the hell they're referencing.
Well, they had a few running gag kind of bits and stuff too, but all of those were from its, like, earliest seasons.
Yeah.
Like, nothing in Family Guy that's new is really iconic or memorable. None of it's quoted, none of it's,
Right. Well, yeah, and again, because half of it's all eosteric, it's a lot of the jokes aren't really quotable. It's like, the bit with they showed the Brady Bunch and they were like shoving the kid, locking him in the basement. It's like that's not quotable.
No, but it's memeable. So it's like, for example, you can easily find like animated GIFs of like Peter Griffin like holding his knee and going, that's and that's like from like the first memeable. 2 seasons,
Yeah.
And then you could also find like memes of like that one old neighbor like hitting on Chris and stuff, or like Quagmire saying giggity giggity and stuff like that. All of that's old Family Guy. That's from like before Fox canceled it the first time.
That's like from like the first season.
Yeah, like everything since then is like either continuing those same running jokes that have been in there that whole time, or just like not memorable content at all.
Right.
So that's the difference. That's the credit I give to South Park, is like South Park will still put out new and interesting things that are like that become like memes, become quotable things, They're still doing that, They did that with like, the pandemic specials had like several quotable moments, and
they're apparently going to be doing a new South Park game in-house.
Yeah. They said it's going to be a 3D game, which is interesting. Well, I mean, you say obviously, but I mean like
every game is 3D now.
Yeah, but the Stick of Truth wasn't, it was 3D in the way like the original Double Dragon was 3D.
No.
I played both of them, man. They're 3D in the same way Double Dragon was 3D. You can move up and down within the plane, but it's flat side straight.
Oh no, they use 3D models in the South Park game. There's obviously 3D models. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
No, they don't use 3D models for the characters. They're flat.
I know what you're talking about though.
They use 3D software.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. No, but this is like they differentiated that this is an actual 3D game, meaning like it shouldn't look like the old.
It shouldn't look like a 2D game.
Yeah, it shouldn't look like what you'd expect the South Park game to look like. They also pointed out that, and this is with the movies as well, that this is going to be movies that expand on the existing world. So these aren't necessarily South Park game or South Park movies. They're like movies and a game that take place in the same world as South Park that are going to expand upon that. So this is the South Park extended universe. Who knows what that means?
Who knows? Maybe Butters will get his own series.
I think it implies more that it could just be like it could take place in a totally different town or something.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you could do a series completely set in Canada with like the weird Canadian like people.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being the case. Or or they could do something like really weird, like I mean, there's stuff in South Park that has to do with like aliens, and there's stuff in South Park that has to do with like heaven and hell. So they could do some like really off the wall stuff that completely avoids what you'd normally expect from South Park. They could have a series that takes place in hell.
Yeah.
They could have a series that's about space exploration,
Right. Yeah. You can do anything with that.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what that actually means. Apparently one of the movies is coming out this year, and we don't even know if that's going to be like an expanding of the existing world kind of thing, or if it's going to be just a regular South Park movie, because they haven't been able to get back started with the series because of COVID. Maybe they're just going to do like a movie like they did the 2 pandemic specials already, but there's supposedly one coming this year. The other thing is that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park that signed this deal,
obviously they're getting a huge payday, so they're spending that money.
Well, they were asked what they were, going to use the money, and they said they're investing it into other creative endeavors they're working on, and that includes a weed business, a documentary series, a deep fake movie. They did like a deep fake like web series.
Yeah, you saw that with Donald Trump's face.
Yeah,
that was brilliant. I watched those.
So they were gonna do
Sassy Justice.
Like that. That's it.
Yeah,
Sassy Justice.
It was fucking fantastic.
But they're gonna do a movie that's based on deep fake technology, but then also a musical.
Yeah, that should be great. They've done musicals before. They did a Cannibal.
The South Park movie was a musical,
Yeah, yeah.
And they did, Book of Mormon and stuff like that. But this is like a movie that's a musical.
Yeah.
And then several other movies besides that. So basically they're going like, yes, we're just going to make South Park for the rest of our lives, but we're going to take a huge cash out that allows us to do all sorts of other shit too.
Yeah. It's not like they made movies outside South Park, since the show got big. I remember they made Basketball. I remember that.
Oh, I loved Basketball.
Yeah.
Basketball was hilarious.
They did the one about Orgasmo, I think it was.
Yeah, Orgasmo is great too.
Yeah.
That has one of my favorite lines ever where like they have this whole caper where they like rob the bad guys. And as they're running away, it's like totally like done like a comic book superhero caper thing. The bad guys chase after him and one of them like screams out after him, "Curses!" And the guy standing next to him just looks at him and goes, "Curses?" It's just so funny because it's like he got caught up in the moment, you know?
Right.
I just thought that was hilarious. And like you said, they did Cannibal the musical. That was released through Troma, which we're gonna to be talking about Troma for a second in one of our next segments as well. But I'll leave that as a vague hint for now. But that's it for On Beat. Our next section is full spoilers. This is where we're going to be talking about, in full spoilers, some things that we've watched in this past week. Two things in particular. We're going to be talking about the first episode of What If, and we're going to be talking about the movie The Suicide Squad. So let's start with What If, specifically, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger?
Yes. As you can tell from the title, this is an episode of What If that reimagines the original Captain America movie, Captain America, the First Avenger, except for, Peggy Carter becomes a super soldier instead of Steve.
Yeah. There's some cool things to talk about here. There's some things that, Will and I were talking a little bit before that were like a little bit kind of small little disappointments about this, and there's a lot of other things in between to talk about. One of the things I wanted to bring up first, I think is very impressive. And Marvel actually got kind of criticized because both Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. aren't doing voices in the What If series.
Yeah, there's actually several people who aren't doing voices.
But the main thing is like in this episode, for example, there's only 2 roles that don't have the original voices, and one of them reappeared in Endgame without the original actor either, and the actor who played him in Endgame is reprising in What If. So basically, there's really only one that's specific to the series in this episode that wasn't the original the original actor, and that's Steve Rogers, is played by Josh Keaton in this, whereas he is played by Chris Evans, obviously, in the movies. Josh Keaton, by the way, voiced Destroy Man in the No More Heroes video game series.
Oh, okay.
So
that's right. Yeah.
So he gets a thumbs up from me. But
speaking like Dave Bautista isn't voicing Drax in the episode that involves the Guardians, and he tweeted on Twitter that he wasn't even asked to do the part. Like
his character might not even be in it.
Yeah, but he tweeted it because people were asking, people noticed he wasn't credited, and they asked him, and he said, "Marvel didn't call me or ask me to do it." So
I mean, very well, his character might not even be in it.
Yeah,
because these are half-hour. One of the things when we were talking about small disappointments for this series, one of the things is that at least in this first episode, it was basically just a recap of the first Captain America movie with a small shift, a small difference.
I don't want to gloss over that. So one of the things is you got 30 minutes to tell these stories. I don't think trying to retell, and how many minutes was Captain America? 90 minutes?
No, I think it was about 2 hours. Most of the Marvel movies, I think, are over 2 hours.
124 minutes, yeah. So, yeah, it's 2 hours, 4 minutes, and they condensed that, to 30 minutes. These are the growing pains that we're going to go through with these, right? Because it is a cool idea to think about, a specific movie like Captain America and go, oh, what if this was different? But then they go on to try and retell that whole 2-hour movie within 30 minutes, and it doesn't work right because, you have to skip a ton of beats just to get from point A to point B.
And you end up basically telling the exact same story beats. It's just, it's Peggy Carter instead of Steve.
Yeah, one of the biggest complaints I have against this is it feels rushed.
Yeah.
It's the reason Captain America, the First Avenger works so well is because you have those 2 hours to A, get to know Steve in the first place, B, watch him adjust to becoming Captain America and going through that and all that. And here it's just rushed through immediately. They assume that the viewer is so much of a fan of Marvel that they already know who Peggy is, so they don't go explaining that her character, her values or anything. It's you already know this. We got to get this moving. We got to get this moving along. I really hope in the future they write episodes that are more catered to a 30-minute runtime and instead trying to adapt movies to fit that.
Yeah, and and we don't want to see all this shit retold anyways, like
Right.
we want to see new material based on this change rather than the same material but with a small difference, like that's fine for like your first beat, but then for the whole episode to be like that is kind of a little annoying. Here's the thing about the first Captain America movie had kind of this interesting pacing where it was almost like a collection of montages that were done in like that old-timey kind of old Hollywood kind of style. And then between those montages, we had like character development beats where characters would be talking to each other and you'd get the drama and stuff. And then like a few action scenes. And then you would get like another kind of montage kind of thing. This whole episode felt like a 30-minute montage wrap up of the entire Captain America movie. It had that like pacing of like a montage, but for like 30 minutes. Instead of like, how they have the one montage in the first Captain America movie where like it's playing the song where he's like doing he's doing like the USO tours and it shows him on the USA tours and it's showing the song and then it's showing clips of the war going on with like, Red Skull's developments and stuff he's doing and then Bucky and the other people that are fighting in the war and showing kind of like that. And then it ends it ends with him being confronted with the idea that he's just kind of like a phony, just kind of sitting around decorated, dressed up in a costume, but he's not actually doing anything. And that encourages him to go into the fight,
Yeah,
but,
he has that realization.
But there's that whole montage scene before that. That's what this whole episode felt like.
Right.
It felt like that montage, but like it just never ended.
It just never ended. Also, another thing is Peggy Carter becoming Captain Carter on itself isn't that interesting just because she's not materially different from Steve. Her morality, her moral compass is the same. Obviously, like in this, at least she behaves exactly like Steve behaves in the role. It's not like a fundamental shift. So, it's kind of like, oh, neat. It's her instead.
The only difference really is that she was more capable than Steve was to begin with.
Right. Yeah. She had training. Yeah.
She was kind of like a spy already or something. She already kind of was like doing espionage work and stuff. And then she went and became like a super soldier. It sounds like we're shitting all over us. I still think it was an entertaining.
It was entertaining. It was entertaining 30 minutes. There's some cool stuff. I loved the costume. Such a great design for the costume and the shield. I love the fact that they found a way to include Steve in the action by giving him like a suit of Stark armor, courtesy Tesseract powered Stark armor, courtesy of Howard Stark.
Yep,
that was cool. There was that moment on Train where I thought like they were going to make Steve like the Winter Soldier in this universe, but that didn't happen. No tragic deaths or disappearances.
It's funny. Bucky got
moments.
Saved.
Yeah.
By Captain Carter was able to save Bucky before he would have fallen from the train. And when he pulled him up, it was really funny because he said like, oh, you almost took my arm off.
Yeah.
Which was like a little funny kind of bit, but
there
otherwise, besides that funny bit, like, and besides, Steve getting separated from the group because of it, that like, did they really need to repeat the train scene?
No.
Like, was that really necessary? Like, there were really differences already made that they could have just skipped that entirely.
Because, exactly. Again, they didn't have to follow the beats of the movie. It would be neat if like they completely changed up the story.
Yeah, things happen in a completely different way. Some things for the better, some things for the worse.
Yeah,
and it would have been really much more interesting.
They stuck close to the established story. I guess like
it would have been cool if nobody traveled through time. Got separated in time. Like Peggy went through. Like I don't even know how that works. Peggy went through the Tesseract, which is the space stone, right?
I believe so.
So she gets space warped, and then when she comes back, it's like in the present. But what does that have? How does that work with time? Like that's not.
I don't know.
It doesn't make sense. Like it's like it would have been. I think it would have been more interesting if it ended with like her and Steve like still in their present, like in the 40s, and then kind of like portrayed it as if like, oh, things were really different. Like the Avengers style initiative basically started right away because you already have your Iron Man equivalent with Steve Rogers in that suit, and you have your Captain America equivalent.
That would have been cool. Yeah. What if the Avengers were started in the 40s?
Yeah, like you could instead of having her like travel to the future, you could have shown like a hint towards like other developments that would have pushed forward with the idea that the Avengers were going to be starting up early.
Yeah,
I think that would have been a more interesting way to end it off instead of paralleling the entire like movie from beginning to end.
It's but for what it was, it was entertaining. I just hope that we get some more ambitious stuff in future episodes, because What If really is, it's supposed to be the sandbox where anything can happen, where they can do anything and really take risks, with the material. Mm-hmm. And this just seemed to be really playing it safe with a very safe concept.
It's a character swap.
Yeah, it's a character swap, and not even like a particularly interesting character swap, because you're not swapping out Steve for somebody who might be, maybe morally ambiguous, or maybe like not up to the same moral standards or something.
Yeah, they're not like swapping Steve for like, say, Killmonger.
Yeah, or something like that.
They're not doing something kind of off the wall like that. They're swapping Steve for Peggy, who's already in that movie, already playing much of the same role. It's just, I wish they could have done more, and I'm hoping that this very kind of safe way that they played this episode is limited to this episode, and that the other ones are going to be a little different. What makes me worried a little bit is that we know, for example, the Guardians episode is basically T'Challa is in the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
And so is that all it's going to be? It's going to be playing through all the same Guardians beats, except it's T'Challa?
I hope not. I hope that they do something really different with that, because, T'Challa is different enough of a personality from Star-Lord to where it should be materially different.
Yeah. And I mean, it would also kind of suck, because I think it's Chadwick Boseman's last performance.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything else coming out that he was involved with. This is it. This is the last one.
Yeah, this is it.
It would kind of suck to have that be like on such a downbeat.
But the big thing about like What If is I want them to do the crazy shit, I want them to go really wild with it. Instead of What If T'Challa was in the Guardians of the Galaxy? How about what if, what's his name? Who's that villain in the first Guardians movie? Oh, geez.
Ronan the Accuser.
Yeah, Ronan the Accuser, yeah.
What if Ronan the Accuser won? Yeah, like that would be a more interesting what if, Right,
exactly.
But, I don't know. We'll have to see what ends up happening with this. It's still, like I said, it's still entertaining. It's not like I'm like dreading watching the next episode. Like I'm like, it's not like it's bad. It's just that it's disappointing, that it could have been so much more.
Yeah, like I said, it was okay. It's just, they got endless possibilities here. So I really hope they really like lean into that. I don't want to see them playing it safe through the whole run.
So our next topic is the Suicide Squad. This, I think, based on what we initially talked about, I think we're both pretty much more happy about than we were with What If.
Well, this doesn't play it safe. This is the opposite. This is a movie that, like, it's called the Suicide Squad, and James Gunn means it. Unlike the first movie.
Yeah, I saw something like the first movie, only like 2 of the characters died.
Yeah, it felt pretty bloodless for something called the Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
James Gunn comes in with the mission statement. He opens this movie with like a bunch of people dying, a bunch of supers dying.
I think it's like 7 characters die right off the bat.
Yes.
Including including at least one of the characters from the
Captain
last movie.
Boomerang, yeah.
So I have here the list on it of the 2 teams, basically. And basically everybody from the first team, except for Rick Flag and Harley Quinn, die in the first scene of the movie.
Yeah.
So the first scene of the movie, George Digger Harkness, also known as Captain Boomerang, gets killed by a fucking falling helicopter.
I was actually surprised by that. Outside of Rick Flag and Harley Quinn, he's probably like the biggest name on that team.
Yeah.
He's one of the Flash's rogues from the Flash's famous rogues. I don't know how a guy who throws boomerangs is a match for the Flash, but that's where he comes from.
So then Richard Dick Hertz, Blackguard, played by Pete Davidson, he basically just walked out after betraying the whole team in advance, but like walks out like, oh yeah, hey, they're all here, whatever. And they just shoot him in the face.
So I looked up these characters after I watched the movie, and outside of the first 3, like all these people are pretty much jobbers in the comics. Like Blackguard's whole thing in the comics is like he has like power armor, and he's like a petty criminal. And despite that, like, he has power armor and he has his guns. And despite that, he's also stupid as hell. And that's his thing, to the point where, like, they had this crossover storyline in DC where, like, a demon Neuron came to Earth and he started granting supervillains, like, their biggest wishes. And he granted Blackguard normal intelligence. So Pete Davidson's, like, performance is spot on there.
Then Corey Pitzner, TDK, the detachable kid, played by Nathan Fillion.
An original character invented for the movie by James Gunn.
It is? I thought it was based on an existing character, but like one that was so minor that they had to add a bunch to it or something.
That was IGN speculation. It wasn't confirmed. There is a character in DC Comics with the same power called Arm Fall Off Boy.
Yeah.
Who was like a superhero, but that character exists in the 30th century, and his thing was trying multiple times and repeatedly getting rejected for a spot on the Legion of Superheroes. So it may have been inspired by that character, but James Gunn would have had to do some explaining to explain how that character's in the 20th century in the first place and why he's a villain all of a sudden. So probably easier to make it an original character in this case.
But based on an existing one.
Yeah, I think James Gunn just really liked the stupid power.
What's so funny about this is that, like, you imagine, like, somebody's arms come off, like, because I heard about the character before the movie came out, you know, when they were, like, promoting it and stuff. And I'm like, oh, like, that'll be cool. His arms can kind of fly around and do shit, you know? It would be kind of gross, but, like, in a cool way. But no, like, his arms are just, they're, like, slow. They just kind of, like, slap. They're just
like
an annoyance. They're not even actually, like, doing anything useful. It was one of the funniest moments in that whole opening scene where everybody died, basically, was his use of his powers. You see his arms come off and it's all, like, badass. His arms are floating forward and it's like, wait, they're moving, like, really slow. They're not, like, launching forward. And then they're just kind of, like, basically just slapping the people. And they just, like, fuck it. And they just start shooting him up, you know, and he's completely useless. And it's hilarious. And then we have Weasel, who we find out, I mean, he dies right away, but then you find out he didn't actually die.
Yeah,
it's like a post-credit scene. It's a
post-credit scene. Yeah, he doesn't actually die. Like it looks like he drowned because, like, the hilarious moment at the beginning is, like, because they leap out of the chopper into the water, and almost immediately, like, Weasel starts drowning, and Rick Flag is like, why didn't anybody mention Weasel can't swim? You know, like, everybody
in the office is like looking at her like, well, I didn't know. Or
yeah, like, I didn't know. Yeah.
Mongol has, like, the kind of badass moment from the
Mongol
has kind of the badass moment from that scene. She, like, runs and jumps and brings down a helicopter, but ends up, you know, killing herself and Captain Boomerang in the process.
Which is funny because, like, she's supposed to be the most capable person on that team, considering she's the one with superhuman strength, superhuman durability, stamina, speed, agility, and energy projection.
But also stupidity, apparently.
Yeah, also apparently very stupid, at least in this universe.
Yeah, so she kind of brings the helicopter down, kills a bunch of her home crew, and just kind of pointlessly. She takes out some people too, apparently, some enemies too. So at least there's that. Javelin is no time.
Literally just an Olympic javelin thrower who decided to just randomly use his skills at throwing javelins to become a supervillain, and that's literally his whole thing.
Comic story. And then here, basically, he kind of, like, he talks all suave. It's Flula Borg, who's a hilarious German comedian.
Yeah, Flula Borg's hilarious.
An actor. He's great. I always love it whenever he'd show up on Conan. He would be really funny.
It's funny because, like, James Gunn really filled up this initial cast with, like, a lot of his favorites.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, you know, obviously, like, people James Gunn is fond of, because obviously, you know, we have Michael Rooker on this team, Nathan Fillion.
I'm gonna get to him later. Yeah. Rooker.
And
he's kind of the most interesting part of the first group.
So kind of like a lot of the James Gunn regulars that just were in this to make cameos, basically.
Yeah. So, Flula Borg as Javelin, he shows up. He's got this javelin. He talks a little bit on the helicopter. He basically doesn't get to do a single thing before he just gets shot up.
Quinn, you know.
He just gets shot up before he can do anything. He doesn't do a single thing.
He's a guy who throws javelins against, like, people with guns.
And then before he dies, he gives his javelin javelin to Harley.
Yes.
Basically, his weapon has a bigger part in this movie than he does.
Yeah. One of the funniest running jokes is like Harley Quinn holding on to a javelin through a whole movie, thinking it has some special purpose because of what Javelin was telling her as he was dying.
He's all, hold on to it for, and then he died.
Yeah, he died. Yeah.
Harley Quinn, Rick Flag, they both survive but get taken captive by different groups. We think initially it's the same group, but we find out later it's different groups, more of that later. And then the other character that's really important here is, as you mentioned, Michael Rooker playing Savant. He kind of brought the movie in. Like the movie kind of like starts with him, you know, showing that he's like this badass. He's like throwing this ball and it bounces all over the room and kills this bird. And then he gets inducted to this thing and he's like a man of few words. And you're like, oh, okay, this guy's like this badass. You know, what's going on? It's Michael Rooker. He's like one of Gunn's favorite actors. He shows up in like almost everything he does. You know, it's like, what's he going to be doing in this? He's just very kind of quiet, you know. He has the one moment where he tried to save Weasel and then like just said he was dead or something. I was like, oh, maybe he's got a little heroic streak to him or something when he did that.
No, he doesn't.
And then
he doesn't do shit.
Everything starts going down. He just basically gets terrified and starts trying to run away.
Yeah, it turns out like he's not the badass he's made out to be.
Yeah. He's the one person in the group that they actually detonate the bomb that's in their head.
Yeah. He's the only other one that doesn't rush into the battle either. Like,
yeah.
Everybody
he rushes the other way.
He rushes the other way, yeah.
And then a bird pecks out his brains when he's dead.
It's the same like type of bird as one he kills
it's this yellow bird, the same kind of one, yeah.
Same kind of one, which is like, you know, that's irony for you. Like I like that like little touch. Yeah, the character, that's another useless character in DC. He's just like a billionaire. In the comics, he's a billionaire vigilante that tries to set up shop in Gotham and then gets like told no by Batman.
Well, the funny thing is that when they introduce his character, the basic tagline for him is that, oh, you know, he like put anything in his hands and it's a deadly weapon. And then they use that for two other characters later.
Yeah,
and it's even referenced because they said that about Idris Elba's character Bloodsport once they went to Team 2 and started talking to them. And then when he started getting introduced to his team, they brought out Peacemaker and she said the same thing. And he said, hey, wait a minute. I thought you said everybody had their individual talents.
She says like Bloodsport's history. And then when she introduces Peacemaker to Bloodsport, she repeats verbatim everything she just said about Bloodsport. Like, to the word. Yeah.
And that's why, like I said, like Bloodsport's like, wait a minute. I thought you said everybody had their own unique abilities.
Yeah, had their own unique abilities.
But what's funny is because it's the same thing that they said about...
And they do, because you find out later on that the unique thing about Peacemaker was that, unlike Bloodsport, he was loyal.
Yeah.
So that's the real reason he was on the team, was his loyalty to Waller.
But what's funny is that was the exact thing they said about Savant, too. It's just that neither Peacemaker or Bloodsport were savvy to that part of the conversation. They didn't know about that, you know? But like, it was basically Bloodsport thought he was the first one they were saying that about, and then Peacemaker, like, what the fuck? There's another one that's like that? There was actually a third, and that was Savant. So that was kind of like a cool, like, little running joke they did, you know? Just through the beginning parts of the movie. And
apparently, in the comics, his Savant's powers are supposed to be genius level intellect, expert at martial arts and computer operation, and multilingual. Weaknesses: Savant exhibits forgetfulness due to chemical imbalance.
Here, weakness is cowardice.
Yeah, pretty much. He's useless. He doesn't do a single thing. You know, at least even like the TDK, as useless as his power is, does more for the team than Savant.
The only person who did less than Savant was
Weasel.
No, Weasel and Javelin.
And Javelin. But at least Javelin rushed in. He gave it a shot.
Yeah, but
just a guy chucking javelins against the military army with like fucking machine guns wasn't gonna do shit.
But Savant saved Weasel. So.
Yeah, Savant saved Weasel. So like, you're kind of thinking, holy shit, you know, like the Suicide Squad, it's the beginning of the movie, they're all dead except for Rick Flag and Harley Quinn, are taken like captive, obviously, you know. So like, is this like a 5-minute movie? It's like, no, because there's another team that we end up following through the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And so we find out that now it makes sense that why the first team we saw was filled with like mostly useless just jobbers, because that's the team Waller expected to get themselves killed, while Bloodsport's team did the real infiltration.
Let's break down this team real quick. So Robert Du Bois, Bloodsport, played by Idris Elba.
Yeah, very similar to Deadshot from the first Suicide Squad. A lot of people point out similarities. I believe I heard originally it was planned to be the same character, just recast with Idris Elba, but they decided to change Idris Elba to Bloodsport to leave open the possibility of doing something with Will Smith about Deadshot in the future.
I'm glad they did it, just because I like that Idris Elba was able to kind of take his own take.
Yes. And one of the things they did a very obvious parody of Deadshot in the beginning of the movie, because of his relationship with his daughter. We see Bloodsport's relationship with his daughter, and they get into a screaming match, pretty much right away, you know? Yeah. That is a total parody of the Will Smith's Deadshot and his daughter in the first Suicide Squad movie, showing how much he loves his kid and stuff. Here's Bloodsport just screaming at his kid, telling his kid to go fuck off.
Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah. Also, another character on the team, Christopher Smith, Peacemaker, played by John Cena. This was originally going to be played, or supposed to be played, by Dave Bautista, but Dave Bautista had a different role that he wanted to do, so he pulled back. He said, I have a bigger role in this other project I need to do, so I can't do that. And then,
right. That was obviously being the streamer, the mascot for Disney Plus. He had to do that. Those commercials.
So more important. So he didn't take that role, and so James Gunn grabbed another wrestler in John Cena.
And I gotta say, John Cena was the right choice for this role, I think.
Yeah, I love Dave Bautista, but this is a role that fits John Cena very well. It's that kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of
it's John Cena.
Optimistic naivete.
Right. It's John Cena, at least I don't watch wrestling, but from what I gather, his wrestling persona is this very, macho superhero persona that he does for wrestling. He's supposed to be a hero character within the wrestling arena. This turns it on its head to make John Cena's now playing somebody who thinks they're heroic, but they're an asshole. They're a total asshole.
Yeah, but I think what makes it specific to John Cena more than it would for Dave Bautista, and it might have been written very differently if it was done for Dave Bautista to more match him. But I think it's that he has this kind of optimistic naivete about authority figures and stuff, about he, like you said, he's loyal to any authority figure over him. Basically, he's an insurrectionist, basically. He would be an insurrectionist, probably. But he's very much he has that whole thing where he's I would eat a bag of dicks if it was for justice or something.
No, for peace. His whole thing is, So Peacemaker, his whole thing is that he values peace, or the concept of peace, over anything else.
Yeah.
And so his whole thing is, well, if it's going to prevent a war, I'll do it. And it doesn't matter what that thing is, he states plainly, the bag of dicks stuff is funny, but he states even more plainly further in, he would murder men, women, and children if it meant achieving peace, if it meant keeping the peace.
It'd be funny if Harley Quinn was in earlier in the movie with that group, she would just shot him in the back of the head.
Yeah.
So also on that team is Nanaue King Sharp, who is voiced by Sylvester Stallone.
Yes, Sylvester Stallone, and probably one of my favorite characters in the movie.
He's kind of like Groot.
Yeah, he's kind of
he's just a stupid character that's
Oh, he's has his hand up at the briefing, and Waller's yes, Nanaue. He's just he points to his hand. It's yes, that's your hand.
Or when they were running over their plan later on in the movie, and he comes in on the radio and he's bird.
Yeah, bird.
And they're stay off the call.
Speaking of Peacemaker, I like during the briefing scene where it's Operation Starfish, and Peacemaker is now Starfish, that's also a euphemism for butthole. Does this mission involve buttholes? It's just no.
Yeah, and Bloodsport's just looking at him what the fuck, man?
Yeah, what the fuck, man? And then Bloodsport just goes, we're all gonna die. Yeah. And Polka Dot Man says, I hope so.
Yeah. That brings us to Polka Dot Man.
Yeah, Polka Dot Man.
Abner Krill, Polka Dot Man. Man, played by David Dastmalchian,
Oh, okay.
who you might remember from a very short scene in The Dark Knight.
So this is one of the biggest triumphs of the Suicide Squad is making me care about the Polka Dot Man.
Yeah.
Who, like James Gunn even said, is like the stupidest supervillain that he could find in DC. And
I saw an interview with him where they were talking about like what other characters could he use similar to like Polka Dot Man, talking about like kind of nonsense characters. And the guy said like maybe Condiment King, and James Gunn like quickly said no.
Yeah.
And he said the difference between Condiment King and Polka Dot Man is that Polka Dot Man is like genuine. He wants to be like a hero. He's trying to do the thing, you know, but he's just failing. Whereas like Condiment King's just a parody and that's it.
Yeah,
know?
he's just Condiment King is just a joke.
Yeah. Where Polka Dot Man's like trying to be genuine, you know, he's kind of a tragic story, you know?
Right. He's a tragic character. They really bring that out in here. The actor, you know, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, completely nailed the performance. I heard on set, he actually wrote up his own backstory for the character so that he could really get into the character of Abner Krill. One of the best things is like the hatred he has of his mother because like his mother made him like that. So like he's constantly like seeing his mother and like everybody.
Yeah. A cool scene with that is when Bloodsport tells the Polka Dot Man that the Starro, the giant starfish alien, is his mother. And then you like see it from Polka Dot Man's view, his perspective, and you just see his mother as like a giant smashing buildings and stuff.
Yes.
It was really funny. It was like a good way of putting you into his perspective on it, you know? He's a tragic character in this too, not only because of like what he is and like where he's tragic from the very beginning, but you know, you get to really care about him, and he's one of the few from the main team that we lose.
Right. The triumph of this film is making me care about the Polka Dot Man.
Yeah.
You know, which Polka Dot Man really seemed like one of those characters who was going to be one of the first people killed. And no, like he lasts almost, you know, to like the end of the movie, before he's killed off, and he's fantastic.
Yeah. The last character from the team is Cleo Caso, Ratcatcher 2, played by Daniela Melchior.
Again, another character I loved.
You notice who her dad was?
Yes, Taika Waititi.
Yeah, great cameo.
Again, another awesome character. James Gunn said she was a heart of the film.
Very true. She was originally supposed to die. James Gunn said that in an interview, that in his original draft, that character was going to die and Polka Dot Man was going to live.
Oh, interesting.
And he ended up swapping him because he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't kill Ratcatcher 2. He just couldn't kill her. But he needed to kind of kill a character in that moment, like in order to add weight to the moment.
Right.
And so he ended up making it Polka Dot Man instead.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, just an interesting bit of trivia from an interview there, that she was originally supposed to die, but he couldn't do it because she is kind of like the heart and soul of the movie. Her and her adorable rat Sebastian.
Yes, her adorable rat Sebastian. Yep.
So yeah, that brings us kind of through the cast, and we talked about a lot of the moments in it. I want to talk about a few more moments that were just great. I think one of my favorite moments in the entire movie was when they were going to save Rick Flag, and they tore through the camp and just were murdering everybody in like obscene ways.
What's great is like the whole scene, like it wasn't just like them murdering everybody in obscene ways. It was Bloodsport and Peacemaker. They were getting into a pissing contest over who was like the better killer.
It was reminiscent of Legolas and Gimli and the Two Towers.
Yeah. So it was like really like Bloodsport and Peacemaker and like this pissing contest. Then they get through like killing everybody, and they find Rick Flag, and they find out like he wasn't captured. That was like, those were like rebel forces that they had just killed.
And they're just lost for words. Like they don't know what to say. And then finally Polka Dot Man says, I imagine them as my mother and killed them all. And you can just see the leader of the rebels is like trying to cope with like, she wants nothing to do with these people, but she knows that she needs them, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So that
Rick
was
Flag having to salvage the situation as best as he could.
Another thing I really liked is the way that they made Starro a very sympathetic character, even all the way to the end, even as a full-on bad guy at the end. He's just like, it's from his experience. He's not trying to necessarily do harm. He's just lashing out because it's like he doesn't want to be caged again.
Right.
And he doesn't trust anybody. So everything he's doing to lash out isn't even taking revenge. It's just straight up self-preservation.
The Thinker was doing horrible experiences experiments on him.
Yeah, well, I mean, it basically implied straight up rape.
Yeah.
At one point.
Yeah.
But Starro was saying, like, his last line, he said, like, I just wanted to look up at the stars.
Yeah.
You know, it's just tragic. It's just, he just wanted to be left in outer space, floating around through space looking at the stars. He didn't want to, like, brain control people or do anything. Like, he didn't want to do any of that. He just wanted to float around and look at the stars. So it made him like a tragic character that had to be killed because of what he was doing, you know, because of the toll he was, you know, causing, the damage he was causing. He had to be taken out, but it wasn't like something to be happy about, you know? So I really liked that twist. I liked it turned out to just be basically all the US government's fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how that caused a split with, as you mentioned, Peacemaker turning out at the end that he was picked for the mission because he was loyal, and what that actually meant, how that led to like Rick Flag's death.
Yeah. Peacemaker killing Rick Flag, which you could see like on Peacemaker's face, you know, that he didn't enjoy doing it, but again,
he didn't want to do it. He had to do it, you know, like in his warped viewpoint.
In his warped viewpoint, he had to do it. Same thing with when he's going to kill Ratcatcher 2. She was like, no, you can have the drive. You don't kill me. You don't have to kill me. And he's like, no, I have to.
He said, I'm thorough.
Yeah, I'm thorough. And it's so funny too. Like we get the sequence where like the whole building's collapsing. And so as Peacemaker's going to kill Ratcatcher 2, like Idris Elba's at the top and his platform keeps falling.
Yeah,
like floor by floor, one at a time. Until
that's the important thing. That's how he survived it, because it didn't just fall straight through. It would fall, stop, fall,
stop, fall. Yeah, it kept doing that until he ended up at the exact spot he needed to be to like save Ratcatcher 2 at that moment.
Yeah, it was a really cool scene, and it was also a callback to an earlier joke between the two characters when they were talking about having the same exact skill set, and Peacemaker saying, but he's better. And he's like, how are you better if we both just instantly kill anybody with whatever we have on hand? And Peacemaker says, like, you know, I use smaller bullets. They go through your bullets or whatever. And then that's literally how Idris Elba's character of Bloodsport ended up killing, or not really killing, Peacemaker.
Yeah, because like after Peacemaker shot, he just says like, how? And Idris Elba says small bullets. I love King Shark. There were several moments in the movie where I thought King Shark was going to die. The moment where he finds those creatures in that tank.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was definitely going to be his death scene. Cause like I knew like when they broke down, they like started attacking him. I was like, oh shit, that's it. Nope, that's not it. He falls off the building. He has the building fall on him. King Shark has like a ton of shit happen to him, and he walks away from it, all of it.
It's really funny that, you know, they got Sylvester Stallone to voice him.
It's so hilarious. Yeah,
I mean, it was funny enough that they got Vin Diesel to voice I Am Groot, you know?
They got Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stallone is another actor James Gunn likes to have cameo in his films.
Yeah, I had him in Guardians
2, yep.
But it's so funny that you have Sylvester Stallone playing a very stupid shark.
Yes.
A stupid but lovable shark. And it's funny
because, like, I read an interview, they said they weren't sure that they could get Sylvester Stallone for that. And actually, like, Warner Bros. Was giving James Gunn pushback on that, saying, don't get Stallone, get another actor for that. And James Gunn said, you know, like, he tried several actors for King Shark. Eventually, like, Stallone agreed to do it. And at that point, like, I guess they managed to get the studio to relent, and they cast Stallone.
It's funny because the same thing happened with Bradley Cooper playing Rocket in Guardians.
Right.
That the studio was highly objecting to that.
Right, yeah.
Which is funny because it's like, it's such an iconic performance, and you wouldn't even know it was Bradley Cooper, you know, to watch the movie. You could watch the movie, not pay attention to the cast, not pay attention to any of the news that circulates around any of the stories, and have no idea that was Bradley Cooper. And that was kind of the argument that they were making, was like, why are you going to cast Bradley Cooper in a role that nobody's going to know it's Bradley Cooper? And James Gunn was saying because he brings more to the role than just the actor. So yeah, I like that. I like that James Gunn pushes back and does like weird things like that seem kind of pointless, but Sylvester Stallone really did bring a lot to King Shark. Really sold it. It's crazy that they cast him in that kind of a role, but he really does sell it.
Yeah, he really does sell it. It's really great.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's time to talk about the best character in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Milton.
Milton, yes. I love the whole thing. It's like, or Harley Quinn's talking to Bloodsport. She's calling him Milton. He's like, I'm not Milton. She's like, aren't you Milton? Of course you're Milton. We were talking for like 3 hours about how your name is Milton. And he's like, no, we haven't.
Well, that was a callback to the earlier scene when Milton died.
Yeah.
And the polka dot man was like, Milton died. And Harley Quinn and Bloodsport are both like, who's Milton?
Yeah, who's Milton? And Harley Quinn's like, I don't think I ever heard of Milton in my life. He's like,
yeah, that was really funny. I wanted to kind of mention, because this is a James Gunn movie, he has like all the like really kind of fun cameos. We'd mentioned Weasel. Weasel was played by Sean Gunn. I mean, he had like no lines or anything.
James Gunn's brother.
Sean Gunn also does the performance capture for Rocket in the Guardians movies. It's James Gunn's brother, as you mentioned. He also plays a different character in the Guardians movies. And in this, he had a cameo also as Calendar Man.
Yes.
Another kind of like, you know, DC.
He's a Batman villain. He's a serial killer.
Another DC deep cut.
Yeah.
Also, Palm Clementieff, probably got that wrong, who played Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy, had a very small cameo as a dancer in that club where they ended up.
So did Lloyd Kaufman, the founder of Trauma Films. Who,
yes. I referenced earlier in the podcast that something about Trauma, and that's because James Gunn used to make movies for Trauma. He wrote Romeo and Juliet, which is one of Trauma's movies.
Yeah, that's
like
where
James Romeo and Juliet, like B movie.
That's where James Gunn got his start in the business, was through Trauma. So
seeing Lloyd Kaufman was really cool. And this is like a cool one for comic readers, is John Ostrander, who's a writer, one of the main writers on the Suicide Squad comic books. One of the guys who kind of shaped that series, was in a brief cameo. He was the doctor who ended up placing the bomb in the back of Savant's neck.
Yeah.
Implied that he did it for all of the characters, you know?
Right, right.
But yeah, like, you know, so it's kind of cool to just have it's kind of like, I guess, their version of like a Stan Lee cameo.
Although makes you wonder, how'd they get the bomb into King Shark?
Yeah. And maybe they put it in his mouth or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe they just told him they put it.
Maybe they
just believed it. They put a Band-Aid on the back of his neck and they put it in him. I wouldn't be surprised if it was just straight like, that would have actually been kind of funny if like he went rogue and they said like, oh, we need to kill King Shark, and then she's like, oh, never mind, we didn't actually ever put a bomb in him.
We just
told him we did.
Just told him we did. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, is there anything else we really need to address about this movie?
There's a lot we can go over, but it's going to make the podcast like super long. So
I mean, I guess we could talk about that this movie kind of bombed at the box office. We were kind of going into that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were going into this earlier in the podcast, where the box office numbers were not in favor of the Suicide Squad. It did 26 million, I believe, at the box office over its first weekend. Warner Bros. Were expecting 30 million.
It'll be interesting to hear the streaming numbers from HBO Max.
Yes, I want to hear the streaming numbers. That performance is being blamed mostly on the fact that the movie was streaming day and date on HBO Max.
I mean, we had a brief uptick in that stuff with like Fast and the Furious and Black Widow as getting movies that were getting that, and then we also had some other ones that were kind of like, you know, that were also available on HBO Max that did fairly well in theaters based on what they were, you know. And so people were kind of like looking at this as more of a down, but part of it's also that it's not just that this is a title that was also available on streaming and everything, but like we were starting to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel with all the COVID stuff. Yeah. And now it's kind of all going backwards again.
Yeah. Now it's some part, it's worse than it was the first time around.
Yeah. It's because of the Delta variant. It's gotten so bad again that people don't want to go out again. So like we were starting to when Black Widow came out, it's like, oh, it did actually pretty well considering the circumstances.
So it's going to be interesting to see the box office numbers of movies going forward now, to see if there is going to be a downward trend, you know, because of the fact that more people do want to stay in. I gotta admit, I watched this movie at home on my 55-inch LG OLED and thinking, why do I need a theater?
I saw it at home just because I didn't have to go out and I could watch it the night it came out, you know?
Right.
I'm like, I can watch this the night it came out without having to go out, which I didn't feel like doing right now.
I didn't feel like I was missing like any part of the experience by watching it at home on my television. My television's big enough. It's nice enough to where, you know, it's not a huge gap between that and the theater experience at this point.
Yeah. But then I started thinking like, I'd like to actually go out and see this in theaters too. And I do have a movie subscription, so it wouldn't cost me anymore, you know? So I'm like, I was thinking I would do it. And then after I saw the movie, it's not that the movie disappointed me. I loved it. It's just that I kind of started thinking, like, is it really worth it to take that risk with the Delta variant going around again and stuff? And everything? It'd be a really stupid way to catch the virus.
Right.
To be like, oh, I saw this movie that I already saw and could see again anytime I want.
And now I have COVID.
And now I have COVID. Yeah.
I could have stayed home and watched it, but I decided to go out and get COVID instead.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated, but there's this Delta has a lot of breakthrough cases, you know? So it's like,
yeah,
it would just be stupid. It'd be stupid. It's like, why am I going to do that to myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if that's a big part of this, is just that this is like, because like fears are rising up again. I know, for example, like I went with my mom to see The Green Knight, and it was really hard to get her to go to the movies because she was terrified of, you know, catching the Delta variant. And I was saying, like,
rightfully so.
And I said, like, how about this? I'm like, we have a subscription to the movie theater. That means that, like, we don't have to pay for the individual tickets. We're only paying a month. So let's go in, let's get our seats. Let's look at when we pick out our seats, we can see if it's too crowded. And if it starts to get crowded, we can just leave, you know? And as long as it's not too crowded and we have some space, we'll just stay. And if it starts to get too packed, we'll leave and just call it off and go like, okay, we just weren't able to do it. It was really hard to kind of talk her into doing that, to kind of do that, because she's so scared about the Delta variant and the uptick in cases with that. And I'm wondering how much of a psychological effect that's had with other people that could have resulted in lower numbers for this.
Yeah. Who knows? Time will tell. Future box office returns will tell the tale.
Yeah. And if they ever release those streaming numbers from HBO Max, you know?
Yeah.
If those are just ridiculously high, then they're going to have to go like, oh yeah, well, kind of did this to ourselves.
Yeah, pretty much. It's been confirmed that after this year, they're not doing day and date. Warner Brothers and the AMC theaters announced the other day that all Warner Bros. 2022 movies are going to have a 45-day window where it releases in theaters before it comes to platforms like HBO Max.
Yeah, they signed that as a contract with AMC, I believe.
Yes.
And then that's just going to become standard with all the other movie theaters signing up on the same kind of contract deal.
Yeah.
And then other movie companies are kind of following suit as well. So it's not just going to be Warner.
We'll see how, with Delta, we'll see how that plays out. If less people go to the theaters because of this, and, movie studios are stuck doing these deals with theaters, their box office, their returns could be impacted severely for quite some time.
Another interesting thing to look out to is we're talking about the HBO Max numbers. We're talking about other movies and how they perform. Another thing is just going to be what the second week on this movie looks like. Because like I had mentioned that Black Widow had some success, but it didn't really, it lost a lot of its audience, like a big chunk, a big percentage.
Oh yeah, it fell pretty steeply in its second week.
So it'll be interesting to see if the same thing happens, like if it falls really steeply as well, or if it ends up maintaining a better balance on that, because this is a movie that could become, more popular with word of mouth as like an R-rated, comedy action movie. I mean, that was kind of the case with Deadpool too. Deadpool opened well, but maintained its position for a really long time and kept like high returns because of word of mouth.
Right.
So, I mean, the same thing could happen here for that. There's all sorts of variables at play here, and we'll have a fuller picture of kind of what really happened and what went down and how big of a failure this might or might not be for Warner. We'll have a better idea of all of that as time goes by.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. Anything else to mention about Suicide Squad?
Nope, that's it.
All right. So thank you everybody for listening. Send us feedback. We love feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. You can reach me. I'm at Tyson Gifford on Twitter. Will is at Voxel Hero. You can contact us there and just send us comments about anything that we've been talking about or anything that we're going to be talking about. Next week, we're going to be talking about What If, that second episode. I don't even know which one that is yet. I don't think they've said which one.
We'll find out.
But we'll be talking about that next week, as well as a few other things. I think Will has a game he might be talking about next week, but we'll get into all of that next week when we kind of flesh that out. That's kind of what we do before we start recording a podcast. We kind of go through and go like, okay, what are we talking about this week? Like, what makes the cut? And so we'll see what ends up happening next week with that. But thank you everybody for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Little Screen. Visit our website at littlescreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.